Ah, okay. Sorry. Should be a do not God, video production, economics and such. Yeah, my keyboard's not working properly. Anyway, batteries, something. Anyway, Modern Mystic has made a response video, which is kind of nice, to a comment I made on his video about cash again. Again, this dispute about why it's not arbitrary or irrelevant just because we have a modern age and we've now replaced some of the transaction mechanisms. We've supplemented cash with some other means of transferring a claim, a commodity from one bank to another. So really this is just about understanding the difference between things that are commodities, things that are real value, okay, and I use that term loosely, versus things that aren't. So most of the commodities we understand their value, okay, I mean they're actual things like an apple, okay, real commodity apple, real commodity, you know, livestock, all kinds of things that have real value in the sense that it's durable value, and it's like a building, a house, or whatever. It's a real thing of value, and you can own it. You can have a deed to it. It can be your possession. You're entitled. Your thing, your stuff. So again, this is this stuff argument. And in that category are things like a bag of salt in the old days, or a bag of gold, and something that's as good as gold is, you guessed it, the old cash thing. Okay, the bank cash, the federal government cash, made it a commodity. And like gold, limited supply is the important thing. You can't have, it's not a very good commodity. See, salt fell out of favor when people figured out they could make a ton of it. So yeah, it really wasn't a very reliable standard. So cash is the standard now, and it's a commodity, it's in limited supply, and it basically tells everything else. Everything else is monetized in how many dollars it buys. So in the old days it was how many bags of salt. So if you wanted to buy a sheep, the guy would say 7 bags of salt. You know, everything had a standard that was based on a bag of salt, because a bag of salt was easy to transfer, blah, 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 blah. So cash is the standard, and the cash remains the standard because when the government needs value, when it needs stuff to pay, to have some stuff done, it has to pay somebody, it needs stuff, it demands the cash, okay, from the taxpayers. And it goes out the government and makes exchanges, barters, okay, for the labor or for the Social Security check or whatever it is, and it uses the cash, okay, that takes them to taxpayers. So let's put that down here. So it's important for that reason. I don't have some sentimental love for cash. I just recognize that any economy that goes bust because it prints cash. Okay, it just doesn't have any respect for the fact that it's a commodity, and it just prints a whole bunch of it. The value deflates of the cash. That means the value of everything else inflates, because they just don't care to follow these rules of circulating the same amount of gold in the economy, the same amount of cash. So it's clearly important what it represents, that everything is monetized in a cash value. Now we could change it and say everything's going to be monetized based on a bag of gold, or we could say everything's going to be valued, or a dollar sign will be put in front of it, so it's not, we'll just change the dollar sign to a salt sign. Okay, we change the value to how many dog leashes, and we'll make everything else valued in dog leashes. Now, obviously, the problem with dog leashes is that some foreign government could make a whole bunch of dog leashes and throw them in here, and that would kind of ruin the fun. So there'd have to be dog leashes that had a government seal on them or something, right? So they'd have to still be unique dog leashes, unique value statements. And this is unique paper. The government only makes this paper, makes it so you can't counterfeit, makes it so you can't play games with it. Does lots of things to secure this stuff. Pays more money to make it than it's actually worth, which is sort of a demonstration that it can't be irrelevant, it can't be arbitrary, it can't be meaningless. It's incredibly meaningful in terms of how the economy can function, because it basically means it's a wild card. And so in the deck of cards, you have a whole bunch of cards, and you have a couple of jokers. And cash is like jokers. It's this wild card money that, this wild card commodity that can be replaced and make exchanges really easy. So that's what it really is. It just represents a commodity. Now debt, okay, bonds, a bond, okay, is nothing like cash. It's still a promise for stuff, right? This is a promise of stuff, and it's now. It works now. You can do it today, get stuff. A bond doesn't do that, okay? Especially in bad times, it doesn't do it at all. And it's a promise on future stuff, okay? So it's not a promise on the stuff in the real world today. It's a promise in the future to grab some stuff. It's debt. It's that simple. It's an IOU, okay? An IOU is very different than what this represents, this cash thing. And especially to the government, because there's only 2 trillion of this and there's 40 trillion of this, the debt. So the argument I've been making about cash, the why it's important, is because this is stuff that's in vaults in banks, representing what makes a bank digit mean something. Is the bank digit is a claim on cash, okay? The bond is a claim on cash. They're all claims on cash, and cash is a claim on stuff. So it could be just understood that simply. Cash is a claim on stuff. Bonds and stocks and other pieces of paper are a claim on cash. Okay, so which has to go through cash to get to stuff. So like when the government wants to pay off a bond, it has to get cash from the taxpayers to pay the person who owns the bond. So it has to take the money out of their pocket. Frankly, and that's the only way it's going to get it. And so now the value that everybody else has is being taxed into inflation, because now it's not going to be worth as much if your taxes are going up. Everything you own, all the stuff, is less valuable if the percentage the government can take of it goes higher and higher and higher. So that's why debt is the real problem. So the problem is you can't just call this stuff money and say all the stuff in the banks, the bank digits are money, the stocks are money, the bonds are money, the cash is money, sheep is money, gold is money. You can't just play this game, because they're not all the same thing. They're fundamentally different pieces of paper, and they can't just be called money or wealth or ownership. So the real problem in the economy has been that the wealthy technically own everything through the stock market. Essentially, they own all the oil, okay? They own all the stocks, all the companies. They own all the commodities, the farms, the this, the that. All the rich people own everything, really. So they own the whole pie. And what they also own now is $40 trillion of paper, 40 trillion, okay, of paper, besides the real commodities. So they own these real things, like all the businesses and all the mailboxes and all the houses. Really, they own a whole chunk of these houses. They own all this stuff. They also own a promise from the government, an IOU from the government, saying, I'll give you stuff in the future. It's the same stuff, right? The only stuff the government can pay them back with, they have to buy it off of this market. So if this people who own this money say, I want my value, I want my stuff, I'm going to give you the bond, you give me the stuff you promised me. The only place the government can get the stuff is it has to get the cash from the taxpayers, buy the stuff out of this amount of stuff, okay, to give it to this person. So it has to buy the stuff that already exists, because there is no magical new stuff that's going to exist. There's no magic to this. Now, yes, these circles do get bigger with time, and there is more stuff in the whole world of stuff, but this is growing much faster than that's growing. So you have to understand that the amount of the money, the wealthy, the claims the wealthy have, the bank digits they have, the stocks, the other bonds, all the pieces of paper they have claiming they own something, a higher and higher percentage of their wealth is made out of debt. Okay, so more and more, so in the old days it might have been this much of their wealth was owning IOUs, and the rest of their wealth was owning buildings and important houses and really rock solid stuff, gold, all kinds of good stuff. Now, what they're more and more, a higher percentage of what they own is debt, these bad bonds, these junk bonds, a bunch of, you know, the government has guaranteed their junk bonds, different things, so that's more debt. The FDIC insurance fund has $7 trillion worth of liabilities that you have to add to this monstrous pile here. But anyway, so more and more what the wealthy own is in the form of debt. And if something happens to the economy, it goes into some slowdown or something, well, what's going to happen is all these wealthy people are going to need some of their money. And they're going to start cashing out this debt. And they're going to say, give me value for that debt. And they're going to want cash because, you know, as long as the cash is still only $2 trillion, it's fine. Now, the problem is when the government's told, give me a few trillion, right? As soon as a few $1 trillion worth of this bad debt, they say, pay me for that. The government can't get the money. It's only got $2 trillion coming in a year. It can't get the money. It doesn't have this money to just throw out to these rich people in cash. It can't get the cash. You know, and so if it prints the cash, well, then the value of the cash goes down, and all the people who own anything demonetized in cash aren't going to get as much back. So if they have a bank account that says they have $10, which let's say just for the sake of argument equals, you know, 10 sheep. Well, the problem is going to be is when the cash deflates in value, when there's inflation, they're going to get back, you know, their signature saying $10 isn't going to mean anything because now that $10 is only going to buy 5 sheep, and so all they're going to get back is $5 worth of value in sheep. So they put 10 sheep in, they're only going to get 5 sheep back out, and that's going to be catastrophic to all those people whose life savings was in that vault, in that promise that they had sheep for their retirement. Well, they ain't going to have no sheep to eat no more. Let's say apples, but you know, whatever. Doesn't matter for the sake of the argument. So that's the real problem. The real problem is this debt is nothing like cash. It's nothing like having a thing of value. It's having a time bomb. It can't be paid. So when I'm saying there's a difference, I'm saying there's a difference between living your life borrowing money on a credit card, okay, and just spend, live really high, and having absolutely no way to ever pay it back. And we know there's no way to ever pay this back. This $40 trillion is unsustainable. It can't be paid back. Take 100 years, even if we tried the hardest we could possibly try, which is compromising 1/3 of the revenues that come into the country. It would still take 100 years to pay this back. It's an insane amount of debt. It will, like I said, just like any other person who was losing 1/3 of their salary, it's a huge reduction in human lifestyle that is going to have to be endured to pay this monstrous debt back. And of course, it's being paid back to, you know, 2% of the human beings on Earth. So all of this hardship will be endured to pay back 2%. But the truth is, there's no way they can pay it back in a crisis. They'd have to print the cash because there's no place to get it. There's no place to get the value from. So once they start printing the cash, they go third world nation, and they go into hyperinflation, and nobody's money's worth anything anymore, and your entire life savings is wiped out, and you're ruined. And that's where we're heading. That's what this equals. They won't be able to sustain the integrity of the cash. They'll have to compromise its integrity by printing the money. Now, the argument made for the FDIC insurance is just kind of a simple argument. It has to do with leverage and the fact that this stuff doesn't mean anything to bankers. I mean, it means something to real people, but it doesn't mean anything to bankers. And so the FDIC insurance was supposed to be, the Fed was intended to do one thing, okay? It was intended to be and make it easy for the banks to exchange their checks. So Bank A would write a check, Bank C would cash it, and all the Fed had to do was take the money from Bank A, take its funds, and put them into Bank C's account. So that's what it was for. So it was the money, it was the bank's money, you know, their vault cash, and the Fed just kept their vault cash in here so they could just make exchanges. So this guy could write a check and it could get cashed at Bank A, and they would just switch the money, and everybody's accounts would go up and down based on what kind of checks they cashed. But this money that was in here was the bank's money. It wasn't the Fed's money. It wasn't the U.S. government's money. It was the bank's money. All right. So what they did in 2008 to rescue the banks and to rescue the economy, was to create some way to get rid of the bonds that were on the market because they were deflating the value of bonds. They couldn't sell the bonds. So the only way to fix it, the only way to make the bonds sellable, was to have a fake person buy them. So they basically told Bank A, go out to the market, write one of your fake checks, buy a bond, you know, a U.S. bond, you know, just put it in the vault. And we know you wrote the check. The check will be cashed here at C. When you bought it from some guy, he's going to cash it at C. So we'll know that when C's owed value goes up, we'll know that's really A value's check, and we'll just give A value a little fake increase in their Fed account. We'll just say they have more cash than they have because they had to waste one of their checks to go buy that bond. So we'll give them this little notion that they have the money, that the U.S. government owes them the money, essentially. And the banks know not they can't cash it. So that's why 19 years ago, well, let's say 15 years ago, the Fed accounts were this high, right? That's how much money they had, like $1 billion, you know, $100 billion in all the accounts. There's now $6 trillion in the Fed. So I can't even draw the huge increase. I mean, it's a line going like that. It has nothing to do with the banks getting incredibly rich. It just has to do with all this, you know, fake stuff. So of the $6 trillion in there, only, you know, $500 billion, or maybe only $100 billion is actually the bank's real money. The rest of it is all the fake checks the banks wrote to buy bonds off the market. So the U.S. bonds are now sitting in a vault, all right, where they don't have to go on the market and take, you know, people don't have to sell their stock. See, to buy a bond, you have to sell something else, right? Nothing's free. So they know that if they put more bonds on the market, that means people have to sell their oil stock or sell their IBM stock or sell some other commodity to buy the bond. You can't buy it with nothing. You have to buy it with cash. So you have to sell something to buy something. So bonds take money out of the stock market. So by hiding the bonds off the market, take up $6 trillion worth of the bonds off the market, you're essentially putting $6 trillion of cash in the stock market. And that's the only reason why it's done. This isn't quantitative easing. This isn't the idea where you put a little extra money in the reserve accounts until the banks lend more money. This has nothing to do with lending more money. It has to do with getting bonds off the market so the money has to buy stock or has to buy oil or has to buy something else. And that's all it is. You're taking $6 trillion of bonds out of possession as a commodity. The people who you paid the money to now have to buy something with the money. So there's $6 trillion worth of buying power that was put back into the markets. So it's not quantitative easing anymore. It's merely stock inflation. It's just blow up the stock market, inflate the markets by taking commodities off the market. It's just like if America could afford to buy all the gold off the market, all the people who would pay for the gold would buy stocks and buy bonds and buy other and buy gold with the money they got by selling the gold. You get it? So they inflate the prices of every other commodity. So putting U.S. debt, and this is just debt, this is $6 trillion of IOU from the U.S. government. It's not real cash. It hasn't gone into the economy. It can't go into the economy because as soon as it leaves the Fed, as soon as that $6 trillion leaks into the economy, then you're diluting the cash. And remember, there's only $2 trillion worth of cash. So $6 trillion, just emptying the Fed would destroy the value of the cash. And it would change how everything is monetized in terms of what it's worth. Cash wouldn't be worth anything because it's no longer a confined commodity of confined size. It would end up just growing and growing, and that's hyperinflation. And we've seen it so many times. No economy that's ever been ruined by inflation has ever been ruined by keeping its cash stable. No economy goes bankrupt by keeping its cash stable. This doesn't fail. It only fails when you start printing cash. That's the real threat created by this insane debt. The real threat created by the insane debt is that eventually these bonds are going to want to be, people who own them as wealth, they're going to want their real stuff. And when they want their real stuff, the government has no hope of paying them. It's a debt they cannot possibly pay back. 100 years to pay it back. It's not real money. It's a lousy claim on future stuff. And it's just that. It's a crappy claim. It's junk. And I didn't go even to the FDIC insurance, where they've insured $7 trillion worth of assets, of rich people assets, that they kept the stock. The stock went bust, and the U.S. government came in and said, we'll guarantee its price. You didn't lose your money. They just gave the rich back the money they lost in Las Vegas, because they had to stop the bankruptcy. But once the bankruptcies start, then this whole thing unravels. I mean, the modern mystic likes the subject of oil, because he made some big bucks on oil. I think oil is below $15 today. You know, as of today, it's below $15 a barrel, right? A ridiculous price. You're saying, how is it even possible? This is 1960s prices, okay? 1960s. I mean, this is an insane price per barrel. How could any rich person say, I don't want a piece of that? I mean, how could any logical person say, well, how far down can get that? We're already at the cost of production, right? You can't produce the oil for less than this. So there's no way it can really go down in price. It's impossible. And clearly it could go back up to 125 without much imagination. You know, so you're saying this, why wouldn't people be buying? Why are they selling their oil? Well, they must be selling it because they're desperate, because they're way over margin, they've leveraged everything, and the market went down, and their asset value went plummeted to nothing, and now they have to sell it. These people aren't selling at $15. They're not selling because they want to. They're selling because they have to, because they're bust. Because that's just too good a deal. Any idiot could see that deal and just say, that's a fantastic deal, right? But the last thing you want to have happen is all the people owning stock will sell their stock to buy oil, you know, and then the stock market crashes, and then more people go bust, and they have to sell more assets. So again, we're everywhere close to being in a cycle of a downward spiral, where all of this unsustainable debt and all of this leverage, all of this crap, where you buy a stock with real assets, maybe not even real ones, right? Maybe not even a real asset. You buy a stock, you put the stock in the bank. It's like if another thing of cash, right? If I went to the bank with a $10 bill and said, well, you loan me $10 if you can keep this $10 bill as collateral, the bank's got a pretty safe bet, right? It's putting a $10 bill in the drawer, and it's giving you a $10 bill, and you've got to be pretty happy, right? And then you can charge him 1% interest or something, so you're even making a little money on the deal. But yeah, sure, you'd loan somebody $10 if they gave you $10 as collateral. So it's really about what this collateral's worth. And this collateral is just worth what the stock market's worth. And the stock market's only worth something as long as we keep making more debt, because debt is what makes the arrow go up. That's the joke here. Everybody thought debt made the arrow go down, and then they figured out in the 1980s, hey, wait a minute, this borrowing thing is great because it just makes the stocks go up, because you're taking money off the market in a sense. All right, anyway, you're putting more and more leverage into the market, let's put it that way. So the idea is that people who have $1 million, they buy the bond, they go to the bank, right? And the bank's a sucker, and they say, look, I got a bond for, $1 million. U.S. bond, it's as good as gold. Will you give me $1 million for it? So they essentially just sell it to the bank. They're calling it a loan. The bank puts it in the vault as collateral. It gives the person $1 million. They go out and buy another bond. Okay, and then they come back to the bank and say, oh, look, I got another bond. Will you give me $1 million for it? And they say, yeah, sure, we'll loan you $1 million. They'll put the bond in the bank. The guy will go out and buy another bond. So that's leverage. Leverage is just buying the same crap over and over again with the same money. So you're just fooling the guy by coming up with it, your shenanigans, right? I just keep paying for it with the same value. And now I claim that I own all of these bonds, but the problem is if they go down in value, I don't own shit because I can't pay back any of the loans. It only works if the bonds go up in value. It doesn't work if the bonds go down in value. And so leverage all falls to pieces when the market goes down. So it's another mechanism that causes the crash. So they got rid of FDIC insurance. They killed it, the fund, and it can't possibly work. None of your money is federally insured. They have to print cash to give you back cash. And you know the cash you're going to get back then isn't going to be worth anything. So you know there's no such thing as FDIC insurance anymore. The fund has 1% of the $7 trillion it needs to pay back the money. It's useless. It's garbage as an insurance fund. Can't work. Okay? So they got rid of that. They killed the Fed, which was a place to keep the banks solvent. They ruined that. Okay? Another protection against the crash. And they allowed leverage, which just accelerates the crash. So everything is in place to crash the economy, and the only thing that's kept it alive for the last 10 years is these shenanigans. The fact that they were able to buy their own bonds and hide them from the market and pretend they don't exist anymore when they're still a huge liability. So those are the facts that you seem to think are meaningless to the conversation. It's not meaningless. There is a distinction between cash and debt. All money is not the same. All value isn't the same. Some of it's real. Some claims are realistic. Some claims are completely unrealistic. And that's the truth. The fact is, a stock isn't worth anything in a crash. We already know it. They already know that the market cap is way above the actual capitalization of the company by an average of 20, or let's just be generous, say 17. So the stocks are overvalued by 17 times. Okay, so for every dollar of stock you have, it's only worth 5 cents or whatever it would be. A little over 5 cents. So for every dollar, it's only worth 5 cents. And that's their stated price. The real price in a depression economy means that all that stuff you valued at $1 million, the buildings are worth this, all that stuff's never going to be worth any of that stuff in a crash. So all that stuff is not even worth that. So you're only going to get 1 penny for every dollar. And, you know, that's the real value. So when everything gets converted to its real value, all of this turns to crap. And the truth is there won't be enough tax dollars coming in to pay any of this debt back. And that's the recipe for hyperinflation, because once you start printing cash, you turn it into a meaningless commodity, one nobody will own. Nobody wants a commodity that's going to lose half its value in 6 months. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's enough. I could play his video. Yeah, okay, let me do that. So this is from the middle. So the beginning, he just wastes time saying, my daddy told me that cash meant something, all this other bullshit. I owned stock when I was 13 years old. I mean, I had a paper route when I was 11, and I made some money, and I bought a bond. You know, so I knew about what the stock market was, and you know, I learned all that stuff when I was 13. And I knew the real risk. Okay, it was a real risk, you're told. But you know, this bond is only as good as the company is. You know, if the company goes bust, this bond, yeah, you're first in line, but you're first in line after they have to pay all their bills, the creditors and whatnot. So it might not mean anything. You know, it might not be worth anything. Yeah, you're getting 6% a year in dividends, but there is a risk that if things go south, you've got nothing.
House for $1 million. When it's sold, the bank digits will be in your bank. That being assured, you can go to your bank and say, give me $1 million in cash.
Right. Now,
and they are obliged to give you $1 million.
Right, they are, because the bank digits are demonetized in cash, and so they're supposed to be cash equivalent, frankly. They have to do the same thing the government does. But the bank is supposed to have the resources to do that. The government's supposed to have the resources to do that. So that's the real point. The point is that the taxpayers are clearly on the hook for the value of the cash. They have to guarantee it. All right? But part of the guarantee is that they don't print it. Part of the guarantee, part of the deal you make with cash, you know, with the idea of using cash, is that the government doesn't print this stuff. And that has been true. I mean, they don't print much of it. Printing a little bit of it makes sense because it creates a little tiny bit of inflation, which is good because then people don't hoard cash. If I was in love with cash, I would say, gee, the government should never print extra cash. And no, I say exactly the opposite. The government should force a little bit of inflation into the economy just for that purpose, just to make sure people don't put cash under their mattress.
It's in cash. You can go and sell your golf clubs, and somebody gives you a check for it. You put a check in the bank. You get bank digits. When the bank digits are there, you can go to the bank and you can get cash. You're starting to understand what I'm saying here?
No, because you're not getting it. Where does the cash come from? The cash is a commodity made stable by a government guarantee. You can't print it. So if you've borrowed and you've put out a bunch of claims to cash, a bond is a claim to cash the government doesn't have. It's a claim to stuff it doesn't have in a vault somewhere. It has to go onto the market and buy it. What's it going to buy it with? It has to buy it with the taxpayers' money. The taxpayers' cash.
The reason that people don't do this is generally because they don't want to.
So again, this has nothing to do with people are doing. Whether I have my money in PayPal or not, or whether I have my money in the form of tables, I buy a whole bunch of or Twinkies. We're not talking about what you think is a valuable commodity. I'm not saying people should own cash. I'm saying people should own something that is reliably valuable. And the point is, as long as they don't print cash, it has as reliable value as any other commodity in all of the commodities. It's better than gold because you can't dig it out of the ground. It's better than sheep. It's better than moon rocks. It's better than any other commodity because you can strictly control how much of it there is. Nobody can dig a hole in the ground and find it. Okay, nobody can make it out of nothing. Nobody can find some new vast oil field and ruin your value. Okay, it's something that's going to be, it's kept sacred. Okay, in terms of its value.
They want to hold bonds. They want to hold their house.
Okay, so this idea that they want to hold bonds is nonsense. Nobody's holding a bond in their house, right? Nobody bought a bond. I tell you right now on Earth, nobody has a bunch of U.S. bonds on a shelf somewhere because they're absolutely useless as that form of a reservoir. Anybody who has money knows you make money by making it do something. Putting it on a shelf somewhere doesn't doing anything. It's not going to make you any money. You want to really make money, you put those bonds in the bank, you get a low interest loan of 1 or 2%, right? Because the bond is already paying 2 or 3%. So obviously you're not going to have to pay very much interest on the bond loan. So you put it in the bank, you take the cash and you buy stock. And then you make 10% on your money. Or you buy oil when it's $15 a barrel and you make a killing.
They want to hold their golf clubs. But if they ever did...
Yeah, so again, he says they want to hold things, and the clear argument is that they want to lease things. They don't buy things, they don't own things, they borrow the money. Trump is a perfect example. It's all borrowed money, and then he can't pay it back, and he tells the banks, well, if you force me to into bankruptcy, you're not going to get anything. But if we make a deal, okay, then you'll get some of your money back. And that's the deal he's done. He's screwed over every American or civilized bank in the world, and the only banks left were the ones, the rackets, the criminal banks, the banks laundering Russian money and shit. So no decent bank would do business with him because he never paid his debts. And that's how the rich think.
Want cash, they just go and get the cash. It's just that the fact that cash is
a commodity, yes, and it's the best commodity. Of all the commodities, it's a nice, secure thing. It doesn't get mad cow disease. It doesn't do all the things that all the other commodities can do to blow up in your face. All the other commodities are vulnerable to disappointing you. Cash over time is the most reliable thing in the world as long as they don't print it. The only thing that can destroy the value of cash is when a government starts printing it. That's it. That's the only thing that kills it ever. It never gets harmed until somebody starts printing it. Fact. You can't point to a single failed economy where printing cash wasn't the thing that was at fault.
Out of date. Nobody wants it anymore. There's only a small
So
amount.
again, of course, they want the value. Again, the bank check is a claim on cash. It's not a claim on frogs or steeples or grass or houses even. It's a claim on cash. Cash is the wild card. It can buy any card in the deck. That's why people want the cash, because it's a wild card. It's a two of spades if I need it to be. It can be any commodity I want it to be. I can go out with a piece of cash and I can buy any commodity. I have my choice with cash. You can't, nothing else has that kind of convertibility.
Of it out there because there are only a small amount of people so poor that they can't have a bank account.
Well, again, this isn't about what you own. It's about the difference between cash and debt. Cash is an asset. Debt is a liability. That's the distinction. They're both being called money. They're not both money.
And then can't deal in checks and floppy plastic cards.
Okay, so again, he thinks that my objection is to the existence of debt or credit cards. I have credit card. I don't see anything wrong with bank digits. I see nothing wrong with any of that because all of it is denominized in cash. And the cash is being preserved. Its integrity is being saved from destruction by the very mechanisms I'm describing. The Federal Reserve clearly has an agreement with the bankers. You know it. Just give me your rational argument. I mean, I asked you this before and you didn't have any kind of rational argument. If the banks for the last 15 years have had more than $4 trillion in the Federal Reserve vault, why wouldn't they have used it? So all of their life, the banks kept a little tiny bit, as little as possible, in the Federal Reserve. How come now they're just letting it fill up if it's their money? If it's their money and they can go out and cash it right now, put it into the economy, take the money and buy stock with it. If it was their money to do that, why aren't they doing it?
There are drug dealers that have to deal in cash, but otherwise it's just not popular anymore.
Okay.
But I'm not...
This isn't about popularity. It's about it being the foundation of the economy. It is like the speed of light is to all other references of time and space and distance. It's the go-to mechanism. Anything could have been. We could have made it sheep, okay? We could have said, we could have put the US dollar stamp on sheep and said that's one sheep worth. But obviously transferring sheep at the grocery store would be a pain in the ass. Again, we could have made it salt, but obviously salt you can counterfeit too easy. So it's this simple little flat piece of paper that the government is guaranteed by putting a ton of little counterfeit fooling devices and all kinds of other crap in it. Again, it costs more to make the money than the money is worth. You know, except for the big giant, you know, $10,000 bills. But yes, you know, you're losing money on a $20 bill. The government's still losing money. Why would they lose money making a commodity if it wasn't a very, very important commodity?
Saying it'll never be popular anymore. It could well one day become popular. It could be what we call a bank run.
Well, no, there could be a point where everybody realizes, you're going to pay me in a U.S. bond? I don't want that thing because there's no way the government could ever pay it back. You can't pay me with that. You can't pay me with somebody's IOU. You're going to pay me with what, a junk bond? That, you know, expired 35 years ago. It has no value whatsoever. You're going to pay me with a house that doesn't exist on a piece of vacant property? What are you going to pay me with? No, you're going to pay me with something that has some chance I can buy something with it. It has to be something of real value, not just written value. A stock that says it's $50,000 worth of IBM stock? Well, no, it's not worth anything.
Again, and people will want to sell their bonds, sell their houses and sell their golf clubs to get cash if they think that that's the thing to do. But the important...
It won't be about it being the thing to do. It'll be about the necessity for them to have something they can trade. And they can't trade dead IOUs with anybody. Nobody's going to want to hold IOUs that nobody in their right mind would accept as money. So all the people who own stuff that says I'm wealthy because I own this stack of paper that says it's worth $1 billion, they're not going to want to hold that stuff as soon as they have any smell that that paper isn't any good, that you can't actually convert it into cash, that no one will give you cash for that stuff. That day is the day of reckoning.
The thing to grok is everybody in America can do it anytime they want to.
Right now, but that's not the point. The point isn't that it works until it fails. I mean, the point is will it fail? Can this be sustained? Can you live on a credit card and just spend into the economy, inflate the stock market, inflate everything, and what, you just make another credit card and just make another credit card and just make another credit card and just make another credit card? How is that sustainable economics? The argument is that this is completely unsustainable. Now, all of the claims to value, half of them are claims on the same value. They're saying, in the future, I'll buy you some of this hand. Okay, so one hand of the half the money in the world, half the claims of wealth, really just say, in the future, I'll buy you some of this hand. Yeah, but I have to buy it with something. What am I going to buy it with? The only thing I'm going to buy it with is tax dollars. So you know that, well, this hand isn't going to be worth anything because taxes are going to keep taking pieces out of this hand. So what's going to be left here? There's not going to be anything left because taxes are going to cut this to pieces to do this payment back thing. So the real game will be is can they contrive a tax that slaughters the working poor, to pay the rich? Or will the working poor figure out they're being slaughtered, they're being totally ripped off, and reverse the game and instead tax the screw out of the rich, okay, and give it to the poor?
They can just sell up anything and everything they've got and convert it into cash. Cash is not any... Everybody can have it anytime they want to.
Well, see, that's the game. No, they can't. There's only $2 trillion of it floating around. And if you want to get it, you have to put something up for sale to get it. To get cash, I have to sell something. I have to put it on the market. All right, and the cash's integrity is going to say how much cash I can get for whatever I'm putting on the market. And if the cash has no integrity because the government starts printing it, it starts letting it out of the Federal Reserve, then I'm not going to get shit for my stuff when I sell it. I'm not going to be able to buy anything else with it.
And if lots of people wanted it, lots of it would have to be printed up to give to them, because that's the contract.
Well, right. No, the contract is that you don't print it. So you have it exactly backwards. The contract is you don't print the cash. You keep it. You don't make the fake gold. You don't make more. The government, let's say the government could make gold. You don't make more gold and put it on the market, because you know then all the gold price crashes. So the real contract is you don't print cash. That's death. Every economy that's failed, that's where it failed. That's the first, that's the step that decides you're never coming back. You went over the edge of the cliff just far enough now where there's no coming back. All right, your center of gravity is now over the edge and you're not coming back.
That the government has with the central bank, and the central bank has with the banks, and the banks have with the people.
Okay, so you're telling me that it is a certain way, and I'm telling you in 2008 the rules substantially changed. Completely different game. The Federal Reserve was an all-cash system before 2008, and now it's fake cash in there. It's not real cash. It's not the bank's money anymore. It's just IOUs.
It's the contract that the government has with the people, that cash will always be available to you.
No, the guarantee is that cash will always be capable of buying commodity. It will buy you stuff, and it'll do it because the cash is also a commodity, and it's a commodity being preserved. It's being protected.
But people don't want it.
Again, it has nothing to do with wanting cash. It has to do with the value of stuff and how it's monetized, how it's commoditized, how it's demonetized. The standard is the cash. You ruin the standard, you ruin the equity between the values.
Because it's useless stuff to have lying about the place. It's much safer, nicer, smarter to have the bank.
Right, so he's saying it's smarter to have a claim on cash than actual cash. So if he had his preferences, his bank money would actually be in some other bank's checks. Like Bank C has a vault. He puts his checks in Bank C. His money checks from Bank B in Bank C in a safety deposit box. He'd say that would be he'd be just as happy to have Bank B checks in his safety deposit box or U.S. bonds in his safety deposit box than a box full of cash. And I know that's not the truth. If you gave him the choice, he'd want the cash in the safety deposit box.
Digits in the bank and just use a credit card or a debit card.
And again, that has nothing to do with what you own. That has to do with your capacity to acquire debt. Having debt isn't what this subject is about. I'd say it's all great. Everybody have a credit card if they're all debit cards, right? You have to put the money in before you can spend it, right? You're not borrowing any money. But that's not what the system's running on. The system's running on credit cards that everybody's thinking don't have to be paid back. So you're basically telling everybody, go get a credit card, max out on it, and you'll never have to pay it back. And that's good economic sense. You want to really game the economy and be a big winner in the system? That's right. Pile up a bunch of debt you'll never be able to pay back. You win. Somehow the other sucker loses.
That's the way modern people rock and roll. There is absolutely nothing special about cash.
Except that it's really expensive to make, and there's only 2 trillion of it in circulation. It's protected. Its value is protected. And you can really see in the numbers that the little bit that they keep increasing, and they have been increasing it more rapidly lately, the amount. But you can really see that all the inflation from the 80s to the 2000s are perfectly accounted for by the amount of extra cash in the economy. So it's really dangerous to print even a little bit too much cash into the economy because it's not real stuff. It's just a mechanism for transactions, and it's a commodity. So the more paintings you put on the painting market, the less the paintings sell for. It's just a fact of economic reality. The more gold there is, the less valuable the gold is. Somebody finds a big vault full of gold somewhere tomorrow, you know the headline's going to be gold prices crash.
There's nothing special about bonds. Except
that's why they have a separate word for it. They don't call bonds cash because bonds are fundamentally different. One's a real commodity that's worth stuff that you can transfer for stuff, and one is a promise. I'll pay you tomorrow, maybe, possibly, if I feel like it.
Some people want to have bonds. Some people want to have...
Again, nobody wants to have bonds. They're just used for leverage. They're just another fake mechanism they just throw in to make the wealth pile go higher. All of those IOUs from the federal government just make the rich's wealth pile grow higher.
Houses. Some people want to have golf clubs. Some people want to have cash. It's a choice. Choice is made, and that's just the way it is.
All right, well, this is just, I'm sorry, I don't want to call it baby talk, but this is just mush. I'm sorry. These are real mechanisms, real instruments in the economy, and they're fundamentally different instruments. There's nothing in common between bonds, 40 trillion, float them as often as you want, and cash, okay, which is a protected commodity.
Some people want stocks. Some people want other things.
People want value, and what can't have value is a commodity that you're making, you're printing. That commodity can't maintain its value. So no matter what it would be, wheat, corn, potatoes, it doesn't matter. If I flood the market with those things, the price is going to crash. Fact. And cash is a commodity.
But the thing, anybody can have the amount of cash that they are allowed to without.
They have to have a claim. That's right. You have to have a claim to get cash. But the point is what happens to the cash when there's more claims than there is cash available? You can only collect $2 trillion from the taxpayers, and that's with high taxation. What are you going to do? Where are you going to get the money to pay back all this debt? Who's going to pay it?
Buying and selling of their anybody can have the stuff, and there is nothing special about it.
It's very special. Asset is very different than a liability, and you're mushing the two terms, and that's clearly what you're doing. You're saying the two things are the same thing. They're not the same thing.
Nothing at all. Even if something, I shouldn't go on because it's just so obvious that there's nothing special about it. You could say, why isn't, do people go on about bank digits then? Say bank digits are special.
Well, I mean, bank digits do have something special about them in the sense they're signed, again, by a person who's guaranteeing them. Bank A signs it, Bank A. Bank B signs it, Bank B. And you have to judge the value of it based on, well, how many of those checks did Bank B make where it signed it and says, I promise this is a cash equivalent. Well, what if they don't have any cash? What if they got $10 in their vault and they've written $5 trillion worth of checks? It can't not matter. Of course it matters.
You know, who's got the religion of bank digits? There are loads more bank digits there is in cash. What would it be about?
Right, exactly. The cash is in a small, tiny, it's a commodity. There's more corn than there is gold. That has nothing to do with this subject. The fact that you can make claims on something doesn't mean you have to have more of the something. Right? That's the whole point here. You can write up a whole bunch of tickets saying you're entitled to a plow. And maybe I only have 100 plows and I wrote 1,000 tickets. Well, the truth is only 10 come in a year, so I only have to have 10 plows available, but only 10 of them are exchanged per year, so it's no problem. But what if, okay, there's a run on the plows? Then what happens? Somebody's told you can't have a plow. I bought one. Why can't I have it?
At least 95% to 5%. Why not have a religion about bank digits? Because they're really popular.
All right. Well, it's really, you should say a religion about sheep or a religion about corn or a religion about wheat. So just make it something else more realistic. Bank digits, again, are separate. They're not corn or wheat. They're not even close to a commodity. They're just a frickin' IOU slip from a bank signed by some butthead who you have to trust, the banker. So you don't know what that solvency is. You have no clue. You can know how much corn there is and wheat is. And as I pointed out, if you all of a sudden the government had a wheat-making machine, you know, where it just poured water and some carbon together and wheat popped out, you know the price of wheat would go way down. So why am I having this argument? Cash is obviously a protected commodity. It's better than gold. Gold is silly, right? Gold has no intrinsic value. You know, it has some industrial purposes, this, that, and the other thing. But obviously the price is way inflated just because people understand I can exchange it for anything else. But that only happens because they think it's dependable. They don't realize that in a broken economy, there's going to be so much fool's gold being passed around and nobody's going to be able to tell the difference and it's going to be useless. You know, nobody's going to want your gold until they melt it down and find out how much gold is in your gold. So it's not going to be too useful.
Bonds are really popular. Stocks are really popular. Cars are really popular.
Only because they inflate in, well, cars for stupid reasons, show reasons, right? They deflate in value. They're useless, stupid. Only dumbasses buy new cars. Clearly, very bad investment, cars. The first year, they half their value. Huge losses you take on cars. So bad stock, don't buy it. But yeah, obviously this is the point is that all these things are up and down in value. They're completely inflated value. And again, the stock market is overtly telling you the stock isn't what it says it's worth. It's already you're already getting, if you're buying something, you're buying it knowing it's only 5% of the real value. And if crisis hits, you're not even going to get that 5%. You might get, 0.005%.
Golf clubs are really popular. Why cash? It's just not a significant thing.
It would be if we taxed in terms of golf clubs. If the U.S. government taxed by saying you have to produce golf clubs, and we know there was a limited supply of golf clubs in the world, well, that would be really tricky, wouldn't it? Coming up with $2 trillion worth of golf clubs to present to the government. So it matters because taxes are collected in cash. If they were collected in golf clubs, then yes, golf clubs would be the thing. Or if it was collected in wheat, then wheat would be the thing. The fact of the matter is, because the government collects taxes in cash, and they are cash equivalents, the bank checks is a cash equivalent. Federal Reserve says so. Yeah.
To worry about. It's certainly not a significant thing to base a economic religion on.
All right, well, whatever. There's no religion.
You won't understand.
No, yes, there's no understanding it. You're saying all of these things don't matter. These instruments don't have their unique purpose in the economy. Very different purposes, very different functions. They are different things, and you're just going to call them all money or call them all wealth and say they're all the same thing, and they're not all the same thing. And their function is, some are integral to the function, some are superfluous. How many paintings of Van Gogh there are on the market? Superfluous. Doesn't really matter. Irrelevant commodity. We know what the relevant commodity is, and it's cash.
You probably make a... whatever. Do you see? There is nothing special about cash.
Except it being the foundation of the monetization of everything. Everything's value is based on the value of cash. And if we kill the value of the cash, then all the stuff that you own that is monetized in cash, that has a cash statement on it, says how much cash it's worth, isn't going to be worth anything. Your bond, if there's 50% inflation in the value of cash, your $1 million bond is only worth $500,000. Everything you own, everything you say has value, doesn't have the value you think it does if you let the cash crumble.
Shirt and get some.
Your salary won't buy a loaf of bread. Your pension check won't pay your heating bill for a month. That's the reality we're heading for. And the only way to evade it is somehow to pay the rich an insane amount of money in stuff. There's no way to do that. Even if we worked for 100 years, we can't pay the debt back. It's that out of control. All right. Well, there's no point. I mean, it's just, this argument really is hinged on getting it. And the thing he's missing is he's just not getting it. That cash is a commodity. Like any other commodity. Like gold, like any other commodity. And it has to be protected from destruction as meaningful. You can't print it. If you make the fake gold, you destroy the gold market. It's just a truth. And when you destroy the gold market, you destroy everything that's monetized in gold. Everything loses value. Alright. So till the next time and such. I can only It is bizarre that two human beings who can sit here, go through all this research, do all this crap, look at the Federal Reserve, look at how much cash is there, look at the charts, hear the analysis, blah, blah, go through all this crap, and look at something like it's a porcupine. And he's telling me, no, it's a beaver. And I'm like, no, it's a porcupine. It's got quills. It's a porcupine. It's not a beaver. It doesn't eat trees, for fuck's sake, and it's got quills. You know, and it's just like he keeps wanting to say, no, it builds dams. And, you know, they both eat carrots. So he says they're both money. Well, no, eating carrots isn't important. Quills and little, you know, chewy teeth, that's the important bit. Cash has beaver teeth. Bonds have porcupine quills. Not the same animal. I can only try. It should be something we can accomplish to get to this truth. And I don't know why we can't get to it. He should be able to agree that the stuff the rich own now includes a tremendous amount of debt. A tremendous amount of IOUs. They own, like, this blackboard. They probably own this basement because they can tax me out of this house. They own the glass. They own everything. They own all this stuff, really, because they have so many claims. But the real important claims are the debt claims, because those are the ones that they'll kick me out of my house. The debt that can't be paid. The credit card bill is going to come due, and I'm not going to have the money, and they're going to kick me out of my house, and I'm going to live on the street, and the rich person's going to take ownership of the house. That's what's going to happen. Right? Everything I claim to be my stuff won't be my stuff anymore because I'm going to be taxed out of owning it anymore. To pay them, because they have the IOUs. So they have a whole pile of gold, they have oil, they have industry, they own Twinkies, they own all kinds of stuff. They also own a bunch of IOUs, $40 trillion worth of them, that are claims on stuff. And there's not going to be more stuff to pay the claims back with. The same stuff has to pay it. So somehow my stuff has to go to them. The stuff we think we own has to go to them. And the fact that he can't get that is... I can't account for that lack of seeing ability. I can't figure what's in his way. So I could make up some story. I mean, I could be insulting like he was and tell him, well, I guess your daddy told you that if you want to be a real player in the world, you lie to the chicks just to get in their pants, and you buy a lot of shit on a credit card. Maybe that was his strategy. And again, the irony is the mystic doesn't live the life he's arguing for. I bet he doesn't have any debt.